Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it a lot. Today in our show, we talk for more about some of the greatest crimes of our time, child abductions in the Russo-Ukrainian war, and the food crisis that Putin wanted to create for the world and Ukraine. We will also talk about whether there is a mechanism for punishing all these and whether it is possible to put the president of a country as large as Russia in the dock. With the best of experts talks, the most inquisitive, Henry Keane.
The greatest value, without any exaggeration, of any family, in particular as well as the nation in general, the children. Stealing Ukrainians' land, a peaceful life, a very time of Ukrainian lives that otherwise would be spent to develop the economy and implement reforms. Stealing Ukrainian grain. Russia is stealing everything it can in Ukraine and even Ukraine's future, literally, its children. This is exactly the terrible war crime for which the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, is responsible, and he was indicted by ICC. How to return the kidnapped Ukrainian children home, and when and how Russia in general, and Putin in particular, will be held accountable for breaking the lives of thousands of Ukrainian children, we will try to understand today in my talk show. Let's talk for more about whether the Russian president will be indicted by International Criminal Court for the second time in a row. Since the beginning of the criminal aggression against Ukraine, the Russian occupiers have deported more than 2.8 million Ukrainian citizens to Russia. According to the website Children of War, 19,546 of them were children. However, according to an unofficial data, this terrible figure is way higher and may exceed several 100,000 Ukrainian children deported. As of November 21, 2023, only 387 children were returned home. Russia is doing things in a Russian way. Deported Ukrainians are placed in special camps, or how Russians call this, temporary accommodation places, whatever that means. Ukraine is unable to identify who was abducted, cannot find out what are the conditions of detention. Even the addresses of these camps are unknown and held in secret by Russia. Why, I wonder? Russian media reports that there are more than 800 such places or re-education camps in the Russian Federation and more than a dozen in Belarus, where Ukrainian children are being forcibly re-educated to, that's right, Russian children. During the hostilities, it is next to impossible to verify this data, as well as to determine the whereabouts of children and families. But how do Ukrainian children even get in these camps, after all? Well, some became orphans after their parents were murdered by Russians and were forcibly taken from the streets and simply taken away, of course without any consent from their side. In many cases, Ukrainians were forced to flee the war crossing the territory of Russia, as, for example, it was the case in Mariupol. The occupiers then make Ukrainians to face a choice. Either you get on that bus and go to a safe place, or you die. One more way to end up in a Russian safe place is to fail to pass the screening at the border. Then children were separated from their parents and transported to Russia without their nor their parents' consent, in violation of Article 4 of the Geneva Convention for the Protection of Civilian Population in Time of War, and in violation of any imaginable human morale. Have you seen the movie Sophie's Choice with Meryl Streep playing Sophie? Do it. Watch it again, if you did. That is exactly how Russians see the Ukrainian choice should look like. Another veiled pretext for moving children is a so-called rehabilitation, which of course is nothing else but actual deportation. At first, the children are taken to rehabilitation camps on the territory of Russia or the occupied Crimea under the guise of health rehabilitation, say for 1 month, and then later on Russia just refuses to return them. As simple and Russian way as that. Article 49 of the Geneva Convention prohibits deportation, forced removal of civilians, including children, to the occupying country. Such actions are classified as violent because no one, of course, ever asks the child for consent. Daria Gerasimchuk, the commissioner of the President of Ukraine for Child Rights and Child Rehabilitation, says that the deportation of Ukrainians remains somewhat outside the attention area of Ukraine's partners' countries.
We must constantly talk about it, and as loudly as possible, and not only in Ukraine, but all over the world, so that the whole world understands that in fact it is not only about Ukrainian children. Using the example of Ukrainian children, we saw that there is simply no single global child safety system in the world. Yes, we are clearly included in a large number of different important documents in which everything is supposedly settled. But it only works if all members of the world community work according to the rules.
Well, of course, pro-Russian voices are heard internationally, and these voices say that if a small child which was kidnapped by the Russians at a young age has already spent 2 years in Russia and already got used to his Russian adopted parents, then it is in the best interest of that child to leave him there in Russia. I mean, this one is lovely. Invade a country, burn it, murder, rape, steal, kidnap a child. And all you have to do to turn your vicious, outrageous genocide into, I quote, an action in a child's interest is wait for 2 years. As the commissioner of the President of Ukraine for Children's Rights, Irina Suslova, asserts, it is like leaving children under maniacs' supervision. Ukrainian children must be returned home immediately. According to Suslova, the Center for the Protection of the Children's Rights already has evidence that confirms that in the temporary accommodation centers, the Russians simply destroy all children's documentation of Ukrainian origin, instead issuing new Russian documents, then forcing adults to immediately place children in Russian schools. Among the regions that accept deported Ukrainians are Buryatia, Sakhalin Oblast and Khabarovsk territory, far, far Russian north, of course, to make it extremely hard to return home. Still, Ukrainian citizens who managed to return confirm that Ukrainian documents were taken from them and they were literally forced to stay in Russia. Children with no parental care are forcibly adopted. Thus, the faster Ukrainian children lose their Ukrainian identity, the better it is for the Kremlin. New cannon fodder of Ukrainian origin? What could be better? Putin is delighted. Katerina Roshevska, a lawyer at the Regional Center for Human Rights, explains how Russia acts. First, the aggressor deports Ukrainian children, then grants them Russian citizenship. That includes this data in unified federal database of children deprived of parental care. This allows them to transfer Ukrainian children for care and adoption for Russian families. According to the human rights activists, some children remain lost forever in Russian residential institutions. The exact number is unknown.
The Russian Federation didn't just abandon this strategy of eradicating Ukrainian identity, but also increased its power and created a whole system that has appropriate regulatory and legal regulation, separate means for implementation, and a separate goal. And this goal has a clear genocidal character and is aimed at turning Ukrainian children into enemies of their own nation, into enemies of Ukraine.
Watch this!
It is my great pleasure and honor to give you Natalia Okhotnikova, Human Rights Advisor at ZMINA organization, Human Rights Center Ukraine, 5 a.m. coalition member.
Watch this!
Natalia, hello.
Hello.
Thank you for your time with us. My first question is, Ukraine has all the rights to prove that Russia has stolen its children. Can you prove that? Do you know the cases that have become known that you can prove that?
Yeah, of course. And this is one of main purposes of our organization, to collect all possible information that could be used as proofs in the next variation of different international courts. It could be international criminal court, it could be special tribunal regarding these cases. That is why we are trying not only collect this information, but of course triangulate it to, for using this in the future. And we do monitor open sources, and we in touch with those who has possibility to return to Ukraine. And there is special organization dedicated to this particular activities to return children home.
Is that possible?
Of course, it is possible, but it's really, really, really hard, because we do see that Russia used this possibility to forcibly deport Ukrainian children and to adopt them in new families and to put in their heads propaganda, Russian propaganda, for using these children against Ukraine as well.
How many children we're talking about?
There is no official information, unfortunately, because this is various sources that we could use, but unfortunately, we could say about thousands of children.
Thousands of children.
Yeah.
And some of them already returned home?
Yeah, but when we speaking about return, so we are speaking about dozens, unfortunately.
Dozens?
Yeah.
And thousands still there in captivity?
Yeah, thousands are there. So we couldn't use the term captivity in legal term because they are in the same, let's say, organizations that they were forcibly moved. So they kind of received some treatment, but of course they couldn't decide their future. Yeah.
Ukraine doesn't have any measures to return. How can children be returned? If that will be up to you, I will make the question now. What would you do to return children home?
I have nothing common with the official
But if you
forces.
would, say you have the power, what would be your next move as, I don't know, the minister or maybe even the president of the country? What, if you would have the power, what would you do to help Ukrainian children get back home?
The problem is that it's very hard to have Russia as an opponent, as an enemy, as a contra, counterparty, because there is no logic in their actions and their word means nothing. So even if you are on the highest level of political power and you have some negotiations with Russia, and sometimes you even could have their word, for example, but it could mean nothing for tomorrow. That's the point, and that's the greatest problem that we, all of us, do have, because we couldn't rely on their answers or their promises. The same situation with exchange of POV for the moment. The same situation with return of Ukrainian citizens who under 18 who has right to decide where to live. So that is why it's very complicated, because they're breaking rules of negotiation all the time. That is the main issue. So only pressure for international partners, all possible, through financial sanctions, through some political steps, through expelling Russia from some international organizations, only through this path, it could be, made some steps by Russia, I believe.
Please explain to me, to my audience, why would Russia need it? I mean, to abduct children, why? What for?
There are several reasons. First of all, Russia has a great experience in wars. So when us had in 90s our own problems, so we had our reforms, we had first Maidan, we had some issues that we need to decide inside the country. Russia specialized only on wars, and that is why they do know that they need fresh soldiers. Yeah, so that is why they abduct Ukrainian children, and unfortunately they use a lot of propaganda, and they're genius on propaganda. And there is some cases that Ukrainian children that became adults, they joined Russian army after this Vozhbrezhyn. And this is one reason. Second reason, of course, we could use the word hostages regarding them, because if one state has a lot of children of other states, it could be some extra, points on its account to make some negotiations with Europe.
To put pressure.
Yeah, for sure. So that is why, and of course, to create this beautiful picture of the survivors, of everybody, of this, this angels with beautiful wings who came to Ukrainian territory and deliberate children, and children are very good for this, propaganda picture. So that is third reason, I believe, for making this machine working again and again.
Natalia, are you telling me that in Russia, Ukrainian children are raised to go back to Russian army and then to go back to Ukraine to fight against Ukrainians?
Unfortunately, for some open sources, there is information confirmed. Of course, there is no official statistic on it, but from sources from our citizens who are still in temporary occupied territory and waiting for deliberation for return, they send this information, and it's awful.
I couldn't imagine anything more awful than that. Do you believe if, say, Putin dies tomorrow or the power changes in any way in Russia, do you believe the situation will change?
I'm too old to believe this, to be honest, because of my last 10 years has been spending, in analyzing of conflict on human rights during the conflict, and I do understand that it's not only reason, existence of Putin as a person. It's not only a reason for Russia for doing this, because there's a lot of political elite there who is in favor to continue this exhausting war in Ukraine. And during last 20, 30 years, Russian citizens are brainwashed, and they do believe that they do everything right.
Right.
So
this is the righteous war. This is the war for I don't know, for language, for culture.
Yeah, for sure. That is why we don't care. We do need to help our people. Okay. We do need to do our work and to submit this information in all possible international sources. And then, of course, we do need justice, for sure. For show the world, for show for Russia that there is a justice mechanism. It will come. Maybe not today, maybe even not tomorrow, but it will, definitely.
The inevitability of punishment, exactly by Dostoevsky. The international sources that you meant, or international community, the global community, what can they do to help Ukrainian children get back home?
It's depending, of course, on their power, but there is some general points that they could do. First of all, to spread the verified information regarding the human rights violations that Russian army and their proxy from so-called DPR, LPR is doing on temporary occupied territories. Because not all information that is now spreading across Europe and across the states, for example, Canada, there is proven, because as we discussed before, Russia is very good in propaganda, and unfortunately we could see it even in internal rallies, elections that we have, that some parties who openly or not so openly support Russia now make some return to the great policy. So first of all, it's spreading information. Secondly, it's understanding that now Ukraine is defeating not only our land, but we're helping Europe, and we kind of defend them from this evil, because it's obvious that Russians' imperialistical views are not stopped in Ukraine as it is, of course, because they shared kind of statements regarding Baltic states and other states, and we are now on the edge of this battle, and of course we need support, military support. It could be some weapons, it could be humanitarian aid, and regarding some institutions that dedicated to justice. So we do prepare a lot of submissions. So we collect information, we double check it, we send to the International Criminal Court, to other specific organizations, to UN bodies, to special rapporteurs, working groups, a lot of, let's say, organizations that dedicated to collect this information. Of course, to do something, to do some steps on it.
But I mean, I heard some voices in Europe that the people don't want to help Ukraine anymore. And not much of these voices heard, but there are these voices. Maybe we should give them the information about tortures. We should show them what Russians really do, because I know you have these cases. Do you have these cases confirmed of tortures? I'm not sure about the children, but for adults, definitely.
Unfortunately, we do have this information. And as you said, that during our visits, advocacy visits to other states, we are trying to share the information, and we are trying to spread these witness testimonies from the first source, because world should know what is, like, every single day, what is doing Russia in temporary occupied territory. Regarding numbers, so even according to official sources, recently our organization, ZMINA Human Rights Center, we did an official request to several prosecutors' office of several regions that were temporarily occupied by Russia regarding numbers. So only in Kyiv region, because prosecutors of Kyiv region returned to us first, only in the particular region, they registered 1,100 and something cases of torture. So it's only for one region, and we do have 9 regions that were temporarily occupied by Russians. So we could just multiply this this amount, and we do collect information regarding tortures. And you know, our working papers, you could read it as a fairy tale of Brothers Grimm, I don't know, or some novel of Stephen King, but all these well-known writers has nothing common with the level of severity of such tortures, unfortunately.
Why? Why they hate so much Ukrainians?
As we discussed, when we are trying to build our state, our independence, our political forces, they learned only how to kill, how to torture, how to use this brutal force against civilians. So they were very good in creating this.
Right, yeah, you already answered that question, but my question is, why they hate Ukrainians is maybe, let me assume, that they hate that spirit of freedom. Because Ukrainians want to live, I mean, they want to live the way they want, the Ukrainian way.
Yeah,
And the tortures...
I do agree, because, for example, there is very common picture from Kyiv region, but I've heard from our survivors from Kherson region as well, because the main question that occupiers asked our civilians, who allowed you to live this way? For Ukrainians, we don't need to allow...
Alone, yeah, I mean, that's our choice.
Yeah, because we work hard to buy these houses, to make these repairs, like everything. All Ukrainians has, you know, a lot of working hours for sure, that is why. So we paid for everything, this with our years of hard working. And in mentality of Russians, they just need some
allowance,
orders.
approval, in order,
So somebody, no, it's like, and this is why there are several reasons if we are talking about some military things, because when Russians came in February to several regions simultaneously, they did know for sure that there is a pro-Ukrainian activist, journalists, volunteers inside every single community, inside every gromada. That is why they started with them. So they started with representatives of local power. So they unfortunately stolen them, abducted them, and make a lot of bad things like tortures, just to suppress this resilience from Ukrainians. They thought that, you know, if you remove 1 or 2 persons from authority, they thought that Ukrainians, without, you know, strong hand, they could not resilient. They did know not much about Ukraine, to be honest.
Obviously. Have you talked to anyone who has been tortured by Russians?
Yeah, it's my...
Personally?
It's my day-by-day work to talk to these people, to collect information, and to make this information legible, and to pass this to international bodies for as a proof of Russian policy.
Exactly,
in Ukraine.
this is what I meant. It needs to be proven, it needs to be documented, It needs to stay in the history. It needs to be shown to international partners.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
And to shut up these voices that want to stop aid to Ukraine. My next question is, how do you verify that the person is telling truth? Do you have any sources, or of course you believe them, but you need to verify it. How do you do that?
When you're a lawyer, you couldn't just believe. I mean, we are not police, we are not prosecutor's office to make investigation, but of course, we need to see proofs of the event. So there is several options that using. So first of all, of course, it's testimonies of the person, and we ask a person to provide as many details as possible. Sometimes it's very useful because if a person was in some detention center, and he or she could be together with other detainees, and a person could share details, and it could be helpful for other families, because unfortunately there is one more thing that Russians do. They keep people incommunicado. It means that they allow nothing regarding phone calls, any kind of information, because it's additional, burden for family. Know nothing about the person, so that is why you could manipulate the family or the prisoner to do something that they want to do. And of course, this information that person provide. Then medical documents, because for those who were deoccupied and for those who were able to move from temporarily occupied territories to Ukrainian territory or to territories of other states, there is a possibility to come to a doctor. And for the moment, forensic expertise is good enough to fix all bruises and scars, even if it was some time before. Yeah, of course. So we ask people to provide these photos if they are good with it, because they experienced a lot, and sometimes it's one of main reasons to do it carefully, because you don't need to re-traumatize people again. So medical documents for sure. We always ask people after police or prosecutor's office or security service of Ukraine asked them. Sometimes they have official documents from law enforcement authorities. So we ask whether you have these documents that could additionally prove
that you've been there, and
because they signed official documents that they acknowledged about responsibility for false statement. And sometimes it could be used some video recording, because if a person live, for example, in a private house and he or she uses, this video surveillance.
Civilians can
So sometimes when occupiers come and this video
has been filmed.
And we pass this information on temporary basis to law enforcement, because they do have capacity to analyze this and to collect this information for every single perpetrator, and to create this legal case and to start and proceed with official investigation. So there is several options, and it's the last thing in the world that a person could imagine a story of torture, because when they share the story, you do know for sure that it couldn't be even imagined in, if you are great in your thoughts, but you could never imagine these things that Russian did with our civilians.
More or less clear with victims, but what to do with perpetrators? You just mentioned the perpetrators. How to hold them accountable for these vicious crimes?
There is a systematic approach need to be done, because some of them, for example, that were captured and they were became prisoners of war by our brave armed forces. They are on territory of Ukraine, and when they recognized by survivors, so it could be an official court. And as we know, some of them were conducted in Ukrainian courts. So when a person was detained and he or she, mostly he, is in Ukraine, so official court hearing with very strict limitations regarding this right for fair trial, for example. This is our most, let's say, an essential part of our justice, because in Ukrainian court, we have a right for, even for those people, for have a defense lawyer, to have some time for acknowledgement regarding this official documents, for translator, for example, to Russian, if they don't understand Ukrainian. So, and several cases in a court, but most of them, to be honest, if perpetrators were identified, but he returned to Russia, for example, it's
Impossible.
yeah. And there is a cases in absentia, it calls. So if there is a lot of proofs, so Ukrainian courts could make these verdicts in absentia, but leaving the right for a person to have a legal defender and then to return if they want to. So our authorities try to inform them, and they could return and they could appeal if they are not agree with this.
But tell me, the perpetrators, they are judged, they are tried in Ukrainian court, right?
It's one of the options, but of course.
What about international courts?
Yeah, it could be, depending on the country. There is a very not easy words as universal jurisdiction. It means that in particular countries that that agreed to that, it could be punished persons even who committed a crime not in this country, in France, for example, in the Netherlands, but if they committed crimes, very grave crimes, so such tortures, such as killings of civilians. So that is why this is one of ways of dealing with these perpetrators. So we are trying to share this information for such countries and ask them to open criminal procedures and to make these legal steps by their means with such perpetrators, because unfortunately, Russians are very free to come to use a European country, and they could be situations that this perpetrator could come for vacation or for visiting relatives, or some poor escaped Russians that they enjoy the European services now, sharing information that they escaped from regime, and then maybe then if they were in the database, so there could be, start of new procedure.
My last question for tonight. What could be the punishment for these ferocious crimes for the perpetrators, according to the, say, Ukrainian law?
Depending on crime, it could be. It could be starting from 7 years of imprisonment till the life sentence, depending of severity, of number, of all the circumstances. But of course, every single verdict should, collect all possible evidence, and court need to check it. Yeah, and could be fair, because we do know that in Russia there is a bunch of lawyers, advocates that could help their citizens to, to appeal, and to help them and to show them as victims, because cruel Ukrainians, we acknowledge about this information. So that is why every single document need to be, perfect. And you need to be responsible for this and ready to make an appeal on cassation and whatever. So it's one of main things that we need to remember.
I very much hope that punishment will find every perpetrator of these vicious and ferocious and terrible crimes against humanity and against Ukrainian people. And I wish you luck, and I wish you health, and I wish you enough time to find all of them. Thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you for inviting.
Watch this.
In May 2022, Russia simplified the process of obtaining Russian citizenship for Ukrainian children, if you can call this forced process somewhat an obtaining. After being forcibly given a Russian passport, Ukrainian children are adopted by Russian families and their names are changed. Then it becomes almost impossible for their real relatives, the Ukrainian authorities, to find their children or legally return them to Ukraine. Again, Irina Suslova, representative of the Commissioner for the Rights of Children, Family, Youth and Sports of Ukraine, believes that Russia is taking all these actions deliberately in order to change the self-identification of Ukrainian children. Let me agree with Mrs. Suslova. I mean, can you imagine a situation when someone kills child's parents, kidnaps a kid himself, literally forcibly hands poor orphan a passport of country that murdered his parents, changes his name and sends him to a Russian family far, far away, and all that is like, what, not deliberately? Unintentionally? No, of course not. Deliberately and very intentionally, Russian-centric worldview is inculcated in Ukrainian children in these so-called children camps. Deliberately and intentionally, they are taught according to the Russian curriculum, instill the Kremlin narratives, and even carry out military training already. Told you, Putin's cannon fodder. And those children who continue to express pro-Ukrainian views are punished until they stop doing so. I know it is hard to believe in things like that. I can hear you asking, why so much trouble? Why is the whole Kremlin's point? What is it? The answer is simple. In such a way, the Russian dictatorial regime wants to justify its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, as if liberating Ukrainians from their own lands, families, children, and the very Ukrainian identity can be called a liberation. They in The Hague call it a genocide. And Belarus is quite helping Russia to commit all crimes in general and crimes against Ukrainian children in particular. A recent Yale University study found that at least 2,442 children, including those with disabilities, were taken to Belarus between February 24, 2022 to October 30, 2023, from 17 cities of Ukraine's Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. The children were abducted from the occupied Ukrainian regions to southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don, and then they were put on a train to Belarus. The transportation was financed by the Belarusian state, and state organizations were involved with the approval of the self-proclaimed Belarusian Tsar, President Alexander Lukashenko. Remember him? Yes, that no less vile, somewhat simplified version of Vladimir Putin. That's him. More than 2,000 Ukrainian children were taken to Dubrava Children's Center in the Minsk region of Belarus, and more than 392 were taken to 13 other institutions across the country. There, according to the study of Yale University, the children underwent re-education and military training organized by the security services and law enforcement agencies of Belarus. You know, a thought just crossed my mind. In countries where the absence of law is the law, what law the law enforcers are enforcing? Maybe from now on we all should be calling them crime enforcers instead. To be honest, there are very few ways to return deported Ukrainian children home. There are no diplomatic relations, of course, between Russia and Ukraine. These two states are at war. The Kremlin does not share any information about deported children, nor does it transfer such information to international organizations. Ukraine developed and Bring Back Kids UA plan aimed at informing the international community about the issue of the criminal deportation of Ukrainian children by Russia. It involves several steps. The first and the main part of the plan is the search, verification and identification of children and their actual physical return home. For this, the involvement of representatives of the international community is necessary, the UN structure and European Union. The second part of the plan provides for the reintegration of children who were successfully returned into contemporary Ukrainian society. The third part of the plan concerns the development of a family education in Ukraine, so that children who have lost their parents or who have been abducted for institutions of institutional care are not put to any kind of residential institutions in Ukraine. Again, enough is enough, but immediately get into Ukrainian families, ready to accept them. Fourth part of the plan involves the creation of a Center for the Protection of Children's Rights, where specialists will work with returned children to diagnose and heal the psychotrauma. The fifth part involves gathering evidence and bringing Russia accountable for kidnapping. The sixth and seventh points are working with global parliaments and institutions, as well as maintaining a media campaign. The observance of human rights. Sounds funny these crazy days, right? But was discussed anyway by UN representatives in November. The hearing took place in Geneva. The speakers managed to sharply condemn the illegal deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia and called for their immediate return.
We recommend that Russia, 1, release all political prisoners, including those held for anti-war expression. 2, release all Ukrainian civilians whom Russia cruelly and unjustly holds as a means of furthering its war of aggression. 3, return all Ukrainian children forcibly deported or transferred to Russia or Russia-occupied territories to their homes and families in Ukraine.
The UK recommends that Russia, 1, cease the forcible transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia and within the temporarily Russian-controlled territories of Ukraine, and immediately return all affected Russian children.
Yuriy Bilous, a lawyer, is with us tonight to discuss this terrible matter. Let's talk. Please let me know, and me and my audience, what does and how does the Ukrainian government cooperate with other countries and international organizations to investigate and counter the ferocious abductions of Ukrainian children by Russia, by the Kremlin?
Well, first of all, Ukrainian diplomacy is doing a lot to punish Russia at the legal level. For example, Ukrainian is working to set up a special tribunal for the crime of aggression for Russia's high level, for Russia's top political leadership, including, of course, President Putin.
Right.
This group already includes 40 countries, and the work does not stop. And we need to understand that no one has been convicted for the crime of aggressions, since the end of the Second World War.
Right.
And therefore, the work is now is not easy, but there is progress, and our country has done and is doing a lot of this. If we're talking about deportation of children, of course, our country, our government, our prosecutors, our human rights organization,
right.
Me as a lawyer, as an attorney who collect evidence of Russian war crimes, all of us, we have deeply cooperate with, first of all, with International Criminal Court, because International Criminal Court investigate this crime, investigate deportation of children.
Sure.
Also, there are 2 lawsuits of Ukraine against Russia in the International Court of the United Nations. The first case for Russia's violation of 2 conventions on the prohibition of financing of terrorism and on the prohibition of discrimination. The second case, now in the International Court of Justice in The Hague, one of the main part of the system of the United Nations. And the second case is for Russia's violation of the 1984 Convention on Countering Genocide. In one of the cases next year, for example, we are expected to receive a judgment from the main Court of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice.
It is great to hear that. Yuriy, what legal and diplomatic measures should be adopted to counter and protect, if that is possible, Ukrainian children from abduction by Russia? What would you do? What would you advise to international organizations to do, to adopt right now? What is necessary?
First and foremost, we need political support, because we need evidences, we need investigations, we need a lot of specialists for this. And first of all, in all of this question is political support from foreign countries to our prosecutors, to our investigators, and to make decisions on the level of United Nations, for example, General Assembly. And of course, we need political pressure, big political pressure for the Russian statements,
Right.
Because we have a lot of some investigations about this question, about deportation of children from different human rights organizations. But of course, we know a lot of information about this crime, but we don't have a good result. A good result for us is Ukrainian children have to be in Ukraine.
Thank you very much for your law expertise and for your time and for the job that you're doing for your country. Thank you and hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Let us continue. On March 17th, 2023, the second pre-trial chamber of the International Criminal Court in The Hague issues a warrant for the arrest of the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, as well as the Commissioner for Children's Rights of the Russian Federation, Maria Lvova-Belova. That means that from now on, the Russian president has the official status of a suspect in the commission of an international crime, the illegal forced transfer of Ukrainian children. This in turn implies that he could and should be arrested and brought to court outside of Russia. Thus, the world received a powerful signal that the Russian regime is criminal and his leadership must be held accountable. On April 27, 2023, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe recognized the deportation and forced transfer of Ukrainian children to the territory of Russia as nothing else but genocide. PASE also recognized the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, as being involved in those dirty Russian deeds, meaning abducting children and adults from the occupied territories of Ukraine. Unjustified military actions, abduction of children are not the only crimes that the Russian Federation has planned against Ukraine. According to the new evidence gathered by human rights experts in global rights compliance, Russia actively prepared to steal grain shipments to cause famine in Ukraine after its invasion. According to the study, when Russian tanks crossed the border on February 24, 2022, they deliberately targeted grain-rich areas and food production infrastructure first. Also, experts discovered that the Russian Defense Ministry contractor started purchasing trucks for the transportation of grain, as well as 3 new 170-meter-long marine bulk carriers as early as December 2021, which indicates early planning for the theft of Ukrainian food and resources, I quote, the sources here, on an unprecedented scale. After the invasion, Russia seized many farms and stole a lot of grain. The market value of grain stolen in Ukraine is estimated to be over $1 billion per year. Global Rights Compliance estimated. In addition to putting tremendous pressure on Ukrainians, Russia's invasion affected millions of people around the world by compromising global food security. In case you somehow missed it, Ukraine was the world's largest producer of wheat before the war. Yusuf Said Khan, a senior lawyer at Global Rights Compliance, called Russia's weaponization of Ukraine's grain industry unprecedented in modern history. Evidence gathered by the investigation will be submitted to the International Criminal Court. The organization hopes it will lead to the first international prosecution of Vladimir Putin for the war crime of attempting to use a famine as a weapon of war. Global Rights Compliance partners Katriona Marduk believes it is highly likely that Russia will be found guilty, and if so, Putin could face yet another ICC indiction. The memory of the Holodomor, that is a great famine in Ukrainian language, should prompt the world to take decisive action that will prevent Russia from using food as a weapon, said British Ambassador to Ukraine Martin Harris. The diplomat noted that the Russian tactic of using food as a weapon is nothing new to the aggressor. It was used by Soviet Russia during the 2 Holodomors in Ukraine in 1932-1933 and 1946-47. The Center for Food and Land Use Research at the Kyiv School of Economics believes that Russia's further invasion of Ukraine will have far-reaching negative consequences for global food security and Ukraine's economic growth. I believe so, because the total estimated damage to agriculture from the war to this very day has exceeded over $40 billion, with almost 1/3 of the sector completely destroyed. And the devastation is only increasing. Russia's war in Ukraine remains the main risk to changes in grain and oilseed prices, and as a result further threatens global food security. Maybe political science can help us to resolve this matter. Let's talk for more with our expert. Let us ask a question to a political scientist. Maybe he knows. Maxym Dzhigun is with us, with our studio. Hello, Maxym.
Hello.
My first question, what factors can actually lead to a global food crisis? I mean, for real. Is that possible?
Absolutely. And I would say that there are not just factors that can lead to global food crisis. There are lots of factors that are already leading to food crisis in the world. And according to the United Nations calculations, more than 10% of the world population, it's more than 800 million people in the world, they are starving. And this is one of the largest numbers during the last 10 years.
Right.
And that's a huge problem for the world right now. And in accordance with the Sustainable Development Goals, which were created and designed by the United Nations in 2015, like the human population is trying to create a zero hunger in the world by 2030, and it's the second goal among these sustainable development goals. And actually there are many reasons which can lead to the food insecurity in the world, starting from global climate change, growth of population, growth of prices, economical crisis, of course, and of course, wars like we have in Ukraine right now.
Well, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? We're going to moon. We're sending spaceships, spacecrafts to the universe. And at the same time, people are starving on this planet, which is capable of feeding like everyone, I believe. Well, it's strange, but that's who we are, that's people. But tell me, who is more vulnerable? What regions, say, of our beautiful green planet, of our world, are most vulnerable to a possible famine, to a possible global food crisis?
I would say that, first of all, these are African countries like Kenya, Zimbabwe, Senegal. Of course, these are the countries located in Asia, like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen. And among them, there are even some countries in Latin America, like Colombia or Venezuela. And most of them are among the countries which can be, vulnerable to the food crisis because of many reasons, as we mentioned above, but of course also because of the war in Ukraine. And what we see now that Russia is doing in Ukraine, trying to steal as much grain of Ukraine as possible, that leads to this insecure in the food sphere.
You mentioned Russia. Well, tell me, how is Russia, to your opinion, is exacerbating the food situation in the world? It certainly uses a possibility of a crisis as a weapon, isn't it? How?
Well, we can see this these tries to to change the situation on the global market of food and to make insecurity in this sphere, starting from the very beginning of the war in 2022, when Russia started to attack deliberately south of Ukraine, the regions with the highest yields like Mykolaiv, Odessa, Kherson, and many other regions of Ukraine. That's the first reason and the first factor they started to use back in 2022. And secondly, I would say that we can see that there are more and more evidence that Putin, he tried to cause hunger in Ukraine even before the full-scale invasion in 2022, as many international NGOs show and journalists prove. Russian Ministry of War, and I call it Ministry of War, it's not Ministry of Defense, they made lots of contracts to buy different trucks, to buy ships in 2021. And it was made just because they knew that they would try to steal Ukrainian grain and cause a massive hunger in our country. So that's one of the main news in the world now. And it shows definitely that Russia is responsible for all the problems Ukraine has right now in context of the war and hunger and food insecurity in many other areas.
Does Ukraine have anything to counter that behavior of the Kremlin, which is more like a genocide? But do you have a weapon against that?
I would say that the best weapon of Ukraine is our army and our armed forces, which try to fight against Russia and makes it very successfully. That's first of all, and it happens on the battlefield. But there are many other chances, for example, to push on international institutions like United Nations, like other OSCE organizations, and the civilized world, which knows that Russia is responsible for the problems we have in Ukraine and even in the world, because it's not just local problem, and it doesn't affect only our country, but it makes lots of problems for different regions, even in Europe or Western American countries.
Well, someone's problem is always someone's problem. Until the hunger meets you at your doorstep, until the war comes into your house, you never understand what is the problem, actually. Because I've heard voices in America, I've heard voices in Europe, all over the world, that are telling that, why they're not just sitting on the table and negotiate. Why Ukraine is not negotiating with Russia, you think?
There are, I think, two main reasons. First of them is that Russia is just waiting for the reaction from Ukraine, that we are ready to sit near the table and to discuss the possibilities to frozen this war. But this situation will lead only to a bigger war in the future, because it will take like 3 to 5 years for Russia to find another opportunities and weapons and other instruments to attack Ukraine even more than they did in 2022. And they need this rest, they need this time just to find another capability to do that. And that's the main reason why Ukraine shouldn't accept any proposals from Russia or even our Western partners, which just want us to stop this war at any cost. And we understand that the cost is already very high, but if we stop it now without having all the territory of Ukraine integrated and in Ukrainian I would say the situation of 1991, that will just lead to another war in few years.
And also some other dictators are closely watching, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And we can see it from, for example, China, which is trying to see how this conflict will end and to understand how to react on the Taiwan crisis. Or we can see it from many other leaders, I would say leaders, authoritarian or totalitarian leaders in the world, who just want to take more space, who want to get more influence in their regions, and to show that these anti-democratic movements are stronger than the civilized world.
Maxym, thank you very much for what you do and for your political science, for your lesson that you just gave me and my audience. Thank you very much. Hope to talk to you very soon.
Thank you for having me.
Goodbye. Thousands of credible reports of Russian atrocities in Ukraine now constitute a mountain of evidence collected by international organizations, European authorities, and Ukrainian prosecutors. Collectively, they provide documentation of systematic and targeted crimes by Russia against Ukraine. And in this issue, we mentioned only two of them: child abduction and the food weaponization. And there are hundreds of war crimes. I mean, looting, rape, mass killings of civilians, and the burying bodies in mass graves. I've been there. I've seen those pits full of dead bodies with my own eyes. Broken Ukrainian families, destroyed houses, crippled destinies, ruined lives. Every Ukrainian has experienced changes in his life since the start of Russia's unprovoked crime of aggression. And no one knows how many soldiers, the bravest Ukrainian men and women, died at the front line. And the list of Russian crimes is larger than only those against humans and humanity. It is literally inhumane. Damage to the environment, flora and fauna world is devastating. So it is possible to hold Russia accountable for all this, after all, or Putin personally, and who should bear the accountability? One of the options to hold Russia accountable is considering the case in the UN court. However, applying to the International Court of Justice of the United Nations is an extremely long and drawn-out process. As almost anything with UN, to be honest, there is also an International Criminal Court. This is actually the one who issued the warrant for Putin's arrest, indicted the Russian Tsar. But in this case, the difficulty lies in the fact that Ukraine cannot be present in this court because it has not ratified the Rome Statute. In addition, since the Russian Federation does not recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC, no investigation can be carried out against Russia regarding the fourth category of crimes, the crime of aggression. Since such an investigation can be carried out only in relation to a country that has ratified the international agreement, what remains of options to hold the monster of Putin's Russia accountable is the creation of a special tribunal, like the one in Nuremberg. The need to create just such a tribunal is dictated by the fact that neither the UN International Court of Justice, nor the International Criminal Court, nor the European Court of Human Rights have the legal ability to bring to justice the highest leadership of Russia as the aggressor state. The initiative to create a special tribunal has already been supported by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, the European Parliament, the NATO and the OSCE Parliamentary Assemblies, respectively. Well, amen to that. Well, what is absolutely clear in these days of global mayhem is this: crime must be punished, all children return home, and the bread should be served to the table. The world cannot remain silent when one country or one person encroaches on the most sacred of human values that people have: home, freedom, and security. I believe that Ukraine, together with the support of the civilized world, will be able to stop the criminal aggression of Russia for our all global sake. Please find us in the internet, subscribe, comment. Take care. See you very soon.